They did not change any vote tallies or anything of that sort. Certainly the intelligence community can't gauge the impact it had on choices the electorate made. There's no way for us to gauge that. This was a multifaceted campaign, so the hacking was only one part of it, and it also entailed classical propaganda, disinformation, fake news.
Does that continue?
Yes.
National Intelligence Director on Capitol Hill today in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee. That intel report is complete. It's been briefed to President Obama. It will be briefed to President-elect Trump tomorrow, and an unclassified version will be released next week. Meantime, there was some pushback on the President-elect's tweets about one certain person, Julian Assange.
The notion that the soon elected leader of this country would put Julian Assange on a pedestal, no matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, there should be howls. And mark my word, if the roles were reversed, there would be howls from the Republican side of the aisle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that nonpartisan comment.
I got some laughs. President-elect was not laughing on Twitter. The dishonest media likes saying that I am in agreement with Julian Assange. Wrong. I simply state what he states. It's for the people, continuing, to make up their own minds as to the truth. The media lies to make it look like I am against intelligence, when in fact I am a big fan. That's where we will start with our panel. Mollie Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charles.
Well, I think the big mistake that Trump made was to quote Assange, and he sort of had to walk it back. He never admits error, but it is a mistake to quote somebody who clearly is an enemy of the United States, who we know has endangered the lives of people, particularly in Afghanistan and abroad, who have worked with us and risk their lives. Their lives are now at risk as a result of what Assange has done. So I'm not sure bringing him in is a good idea. Look, there's no question that the Obama administration has trumped up this issue that it ignored for 8.5 years, particularly the last year and a half, as a way to introduce some doubt in the minds of the electorate about the legitimacy of the Trump victory. But that may be true, but nonetheless, I think it's a mistake for Trump to wade into this. He should simply stay out, let it play out. Republicans and Democrats want to know the extent of this as a way to prevent it in the future. I don't think in the end it really harms Trump, but the attention he's given it has put the focus on it to the extent that people are going to ask, why is he so defensive about this?
Mollie, what was striking was really the Republicans on this committee and what they were saying about Russia, the threat from Russia, the perception about that. Clearly there's some difference in the approach between the President-elect and senior Republicans on Capitol Hill.
Well, in one sense. In another sense, there's actually a lot of agreement. There's agreement that Russians are meddling in the election, and they are going to try and meddle in the way that we do things.
Let me interrupt you. Just to be clear, we want to make clear every time we say it that it's not actually affecting the vote tally in the election, but the lead up to the election and the hacking that around it. Okay.
Right, and it's good to point that out because, in fact, a new YouGov poll showed that over half of Democrats actually believe that Russians did hack into the voting totals and affected the vote totals, which is not true. But Russians want to undermine our confidence in our institutions, and that's why this whole debate is so interesting, because you have people on both sides actually playing into that. One of the worst things you can do is actually decrease confidence in how our elections are being done. So President Obama, who has had 8 years of failure, who failed at the reset, who mocked Mitt Romney and other critics for saying that Russia was a serious threat. Now, as he's heading out, now he wants to bring down the hammer on Russia, and we're worried about President-elect Trump being too political in his posture toward Russia. It looks very much also like the other side is having trouble.
A.B., when President-elect Trump gets this briefing tomorrow, listening to those intelligence officials today and their confidence and their sticking by that assessment, how do you think this plays?
Well, that's really the problem is for the Republicans on Capitol Hill. What you heard in the last couple of days is sort of this final public break where they don't want to actually be critical of the things that Trump says about Putin or even the way he's knocking the intelligence community. He's picked an official fight with them. It started 2 weeks ago, about this sort of the day before he nominated Rex Tillerson for Secretary of State. And he's really put them in an untenable situation. So while they're upset with him on several issues that they're staying silent about, his refusal to divest, his sort of crony capitalism deal of the day where he picks on a company and makes them keep jobs here or whatever, this is the one thing where he's pushed them into a corner. And so what you've heard them say today, both on the record and on background, is, look, tomorrow he's got to come out and say something that's judicious and measured and presidential after this meeting. You can be skeptical of the intelligence, but the antagonism with which he has treated this community on this issue is really over the top, and they are expecting some kind of response that's a change tomorrow.
Isn't the nuance, though, which we obviously don't get in 140 characters, Charles, that he has a problem with the leadership of intelligence, the John Brennans, the Clappers, who have been caught in several instances over the years, not essentially being forthright about different things and looking at least like they're political, and that the problem is at the leadership level and not the men and women of the intelligence community who are doing the work to try to keep the country safe.
Look, that's a perfectly legitimate distinction, and we've been on the panel and elsewhere critical of a lot of the leaders who've been appointed by Obama, and they have politicized intelligence. We know about that as a matter of fact. But nonetheless, the way it's been interpreted, I mean, if you're going to use Twitter, then you have to be aware that you can't be subtle and your message can be misunderstood. But I do think on one issue, which is the idea that he's going to reorganize or cut back their powers or get his revenge on by looking again at how the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, how the office is established, is a ridiculous issue. He's a new administration. The DNI was an invention of the 9/11 Commission. It's been 15 years. It's worth a look. Has it worked? Has it not? Any administration ought to come in and to question every agency, and intelligence is no exception. It's not sacred on that count.
To your point, Sean Spicer, the incoming White House press secretary, addressing this Wall Street Journal article, very detailed about tearing up essentially and reworking, restructuring the intelligence community. Listen. Okay.
These reports are false. All transition activities are for information gathering purposes, and all discussions are tentative. But I want to reiterate, there is no truth to this idea of restructuring the intelligence community infrastructure. It is 100% false.
Molly.
Yes, it seems that the Trump administration wanted to walk back what we're hearing, that they might revamp these agencies. That's actually disappointing to me because I think that we do need to revamp these agencies. We do have a problem with a highly political intelligence mechanism in our government, and it needs major reform. And this is a problem that goes back, it's not just this administration, it goes back decades. You look at how Foreign Policy magazine, which is no conservative publication, said in 2013 that there was a huge problem with politicization of the intelligence agencies. In every other country knew that Syria was using chemical weapons, and our people didn't put it out there because they were worried, because they knew that President Obama had made that one of his red lines and they didn't want to publicly go against him. I mean, we're listening to what DNI Clapper said today, and in 2013 he lied in front of Congress when asked if we were collecting data on hundreds of millions of Americans. He said we weren't doing it. That was false, and Senator Wyden, to whom he told this, knew it was false. I mean, so we're listening to perjurers. We have all these problems with all this politicization. I really hope that the Trump administration does look at the problems we have and thinks about doing what we need to reform this so that we can trust what our intelligence agencies are saying.
I want to go to the other panel after the break, but quickly, the DNI coming in, who Donald Trump wants, is former Senator from Indiana, Dan Coats. Interesting, AB, that Ben Sasse, current senator, who has obviously been no big fan of the president-elect in the campaign, tweeted this: "There are many reasons to love the choice of Dan Coats for DNI, including that he is steely-eyed about the fact that Putin is no friend."
Right. This is a very comforting pick for Republicans at the end of a long couple days. And Dan Coats obviously has everyone's respect on both sides of the aisle.